Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to Grateful Goddesses, and I'm really grateful that you're here. I am a broken arm, I am appendix removed, and I am cancer. So when you hear that, what do you think? Just take a minute. I am a broken arm. Yes, I had a broken arm when I was 12, sliding down the banister and fell off. Yes, my appendix removed when I was 13. Those 2 years, they were tough. And yes, I had cancer 10 years ago, and I'm cancer-free now. But those episodes and those occurrences in my life, they don't define who I am. So why, when people have mental illness, do some people say, I am bipolar, I am schizophrenic, I am depressed? Well, there's a stigma, as we know, associated with mental health issues. If you are someone who is suffering of mental health issues, or if you know someone who is, I'm really hoping that today's episode of Grateful Goddess will help you to release that stigma. And I also hope that if you perhaps don't know someone who is suffering and you just see this in the news and see all the different people who might be coming out, that you release that stigma that you may have, because really it's important to define people for who they are and shift your mindset and separate them from that disease that unfortunately that they may experience. Our guest today is Gillian Stein. Her great-grandfather in 1909 founded Henry's Camera, Canada's leading camera chain. Gillian is the CEO and owner. Welcome, Gillian, and also Camille, one of our featured goddesses, to today's show.
Thank you, Karen, for having me.
Thank you so much. I was very, very excited when I found your article, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But we want to get to know you first, Gillian. So can you tell us a bit about your background, where you were born, where you grew up? Are you married? Do you have kids? What did you study? What's your favorite color? Why did you stay in the family business? Do you like taking pictures, etc.?
Just a few questions.
Just a few.
So I was born and raised in Toronto, Canada. I've left many times. I went to school in Montreal, so university, did my undergrad in Montreal, did my master's in England, spent some time living in New York. I've traveled extensively all around South Asia and Europe and South America. So yeah, travel is a big part, or was a big part of my life when that was something that was easy to do. I am married. I've got 2 little boys. I guess not so little anymore, 8 and 11. So middle boys, I guess. Okay. And my time in the family business. So I actually never thought that I was going to work in the family business. I was very adamant that I wouldn't. Growing up and seeing how hard it was for my family. So retail's a really tough business to be in. There's very few people who aspire to a career in retail. It's not something that most people people tend to land in it.
Right.
And so I actually really, my passion is in social responsibility, corporate social responsibility. So I did my undergrad in business. I did my master's in international development. And that was really where I wanted to spend my time. And it was about 12 years ago that I decided that it made sense for me to come back to the family business. There's lots of wonderful values in it that I felt very connected to and very passionate about. And I felt that the experiences that I'd had outside could really lend itself well to the business. And I took over 6 years ago. So it's been a journey.
It's been a journey, especially through COVID too, which
Yes.
you seem to, from reading articles, you've seemed to get through in a difficult but yet positive manner.
Yes.
The business.
Yeah.
Do you like taking photos?
I I do. I don't do it anymore. So when I was younger, I had a dark room. I took a lot of classes, and I'm obviously have always been in my life surrounded by beautiful photographer and incredibly talented artists. So most of our staff are photographers themselves, very passionate. And I'm always amazed when I see that these are the people that work for us, that they so impressed with what it is that they do. So I do love it. My husband, however, is very artistic, has an amazing eye. And on our honeymoon, he picked up my camera and he hasn't put it down since. So he's become the family photographer. And maybe one day when I'm older and have more time on my hands, that I'll be able to pick it back up again. But for now, I get to enjoy his photography, and he gets to capture our family, and I get to, live it and enjoy it.
Well, it's interesting you say to capture. So, the saying, a picture says 1,000 words, right? And now with a lot of young adults on Instagram, they're posting photos of their beautiful lives, and there's a lot of FOMO going on, but really we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And for you, if a photo was taken of you back in 1997 when you were 18 years old in Montreal, what would that photo look like?
Would have looked like a happy, first year. I was in first year university, and I would have been looking like everybody else, having a great time in university and loving it.
However, what was the story behind the picture?
So when I was in my first year of university, I struggled a lot, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Sorry, I should correct myself. I first had symptoms of bipolar disorder when I was in my first year university, but I actually wasn't diagnosed until many years later. But that would have been the beginning of sort of what was some really difficult times in my life, some really challenging experience, and a lot of depression, and some other, I had a number of manic episodes, and those definitely really took hold at that time.
Can you explain what a manic episode feels like?
So everybody's different. So for me, when it became very apparent, I'll talk about my experience when it became very apparent that something was, I was experiencing something more than just the highs and lows of being a teenager. I, as I said, I was living in Montreal at the time, and I found myself at the airport in Montreal. And I was convinced for some reason that I was actually at the airport in Phoenix, Arizona. And I was looking for the bus schedule from Phoenix to Tucson, which if you were in the Phoenix airport would be a perfectly reasonable thing to ask for. But I was looking for it in the Montreal airport and getting very upset with the staff there. They didn't understand what I was talking about. I was yelling and screaming at them, and it was this, very strange experience. And I still to this day don't know why I was at the airport. If I was supposed to be picking somebody up at that moment, I always say I apologize if I didn't pick you up that day, because I have no idea why I was there. I don't remember getting there, and I don't remember getting home. But I know that moment happened, and that to me was my first experience of what they call like it's a manic episode with elements of psychosis, but the definition of a manic episode is really when you experience that for longer periods of time. So this was a very brief period, but it was real. So that was a manic episode. And I can't really remember what else surrounded it to be able to say what all the other things that happened were while I was having that episode.
But you said the words, it felt real.
It felt extremely real.
And no one could convince you otherwise, but you did call your mom.
So at some point when I got home and figured out that like I said, this is the one part that I remember as being in the airport and nobody understanding why they couldn't help me. And then I guess at some point I got home back to my dorm and realized that I had done something that just didn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I called my mom and said, I need help. You need to come and you need to come and help me.
And I understand you had bipolar family members, and you grew up knowing what bipolar disorder was. So in effect, you know, there are some young adults that might be feeling these symptoms but don't want to share with their family. But you had mentioned in another article that because you grew up with it, you thought, oh my gosh, okay, now I think I might be experiencing this. Is that true?
So I didn't know that I had family members who had bipolar disorder until I was probably 17. So just before I actually got diagnosed myself, mm-hmm. we talked about mental health, but never specifically. So I didn't know the facts. Mm-hmm. It was more that there was this sort of sense of heightened awareness in my family.
Right.
But I didn't know until I was 17 that my father had bipolar disorder. And so I didn't know when I was younger that the things that I saw him doing, that's what I was associated with. So while again, my parents were very attuned to it, we mm-hmm. still didn't talk about it. So I didn't really understand what was going on. Right. I just knew that something wasn't right. And most importantly, though, was that I knew that I was comfortable to call my mom.
Yeah.
And my mom was much more aware and knew that she needed to react quickly. Like this wasn't a thing to ignore.
Exactly.
That's, I think, what was different about my family, perhaps, than a lot of other people.
Yes, totally. You felt comfortable, thank goodness, calling your mom, and she knew what to do to help you. Yeah. Camille has some questions for you now.
Hi. Yeah, I was curious because in your article, A Life Uninterrupted, a CEO Canadian retail chain opens up about being bipolar, you mentioned how you felt like your mind was betraying you and that it was a very scary place to be. My question is, how did you feel? I mean, how did like thinking you were in Arizona, discovering you weren't, how did you start trusting yourself again, or being able to trigger or understand the triggers that might cause for you to be somewhere else and realize maybe you're not really where your mind is portraying that you are, if that makes any sense?
It does. It's a difficult question. So how did I start to trust myself? I don't know. I mean, I guess the first step was talking to someone about it, right? So I went to see a psychiatrist who, the first step was, at that point, was they put me on some medication and which would have started to control how I felt. I think I definitely spent a lot of time, especially when I was younger, being scared that at any moment something could happen, because what I don't know is how that first moment happened. I don't know what triggered it. Now, as I'm older, I can reflect back and it's sort of a series of, like, I must have, it was first year university, right? So you're not sleeping a lot, you're stressed, you're anxious, you're out of, you're not taking care of yourself. Nobody in first year university takes care of themselves, right? And then you add all the anxiety and stress and pressure on top of that. And it obviously must have been building, but I wouldn't have known that at the time. So now I can say that and feel confident. But at that point, I, to be honest, was just scared. And I probably spent a lot of that first year being very cautious about letting myself kind of go too far, and would have spent probably more time than I would have liked to have on my own, to be honest, in my room where I was safe.
I wanted to mention that today's interview is a very personal one for me because I suffered from situational anxiety, situational depression. I suffered from panic attacks back when I was diagnosed with cancer. And 2 years after I had been fully healed physically, I started to get these panic attacks. And it's like your brain is taking over what your body. And just once I was driving and I had with my son, and all of a sudden I felt, and I'm ashamed to say, I felt like turning the wheel and going over a bridge. my mind was like, just do it. And I don't know if that was a delusion or anything now, looking back now, I'm thinking maybe it was, but I just had my heart pounding and I pulled over and I said to my son, drive home. And I too went to seek help and realized it was situational anxiety and I needed to take medication. And I'm still taking it because I tried to go off and those panic attacks come back. I mean, your body just doesn't always do what your mind wants it to do. But when I talked with my parents before this interview and a bit about you, about bipolar, it is in my family. And many family members do have it or had it. And my mother told me of several who died, who committed suicide or attempted suicide. And she went through the list, and it's more than on my hand and the fingers on my hand. And she's talked about people who had either attempted suicide or died as a result of having bipolar and depression. But I thought growing up that person had a heart attack or that person died in a car crash or never knew quite why. I was even told that my grandmother, now she died when my dad was 10, but I remember growing up and my dad saying she died of a broken heart. And I thought, wow, a heart really breaks, like these were the stories. And there's the stigma, just in knowing, growing up and now it coming out that, wow, there are so many people in people's family. I mean, 1 in 5 Canadians and Americans suffer from bipolar disorder. And I wanted to know from you, you did say that the impetus for you sharing your story and coming out was due to a family friend who had died. Can you share with us that story?
Yeah, this was, I think it was probably about 3 years ago. And someone that that our family knew and was connected through our business, his wife died by suicide. And we went to the funeral, and I just remember that no one at the funeral talked about how she died. They had 2 daughters who were at the time in their late teens, early 20s, just at a time when you can only imagine that you need you want your mother around, right? To help you as you're sort of launching into life. And they were obviously extremely distraught, but again, they couldn't talk about it. And I could only sense the guilt that they felt, in those moments you remember the last conversation you had and is it my fault and all of those things, but they couldn't talk about it. And I just remember thinking, how do you heal? How do you recover and grieve when you can't openly discuss, why this happened? And obviously, taking a step back is if they had been able to be more open, if there was less stigma around mental health, would this woman have been able to have gotten support and help, and somebody would have been able to understand what she was experiencing, and maybe this never would have happened to begin with. And so I remember after the funeral, my sister and my father and I were sitting and talking, and I just remember thinking and saying, if we don't talk about our experience, then we're just continuing the stigma. And why don't we share? We are a successful family. We're, we've built this incredible business. We're all relatively, happy and married and not that that's not the standard for happiness, but we're living lives, right? We're very fulfilled. And if we can't share, then how can we expect anybody else to share? And so it was at that moment that I felt very convinced that I needed to share my story, because if I don't, then that's just another opportunity that's lost.
And what's been the response to your sharing?
Incredibly overwhelming, positive. I've had so many people reaching out to me that either I know or I don't know, sharing their stories, explaining how it has helped them feel more comfortable and that it gives them hope. And it's been amazing. It's been amazing. Nothing negative. All the scary things that you think that are going to happen, not there.
Which is really quite incredible. I'm going to turn it to Camille now.
Well, I had some questions about the medication part of things with bipolar. There's a lot of stigma also with even getting medication, being medicated, whether or not certain people even have, a lot of times how they find out they're bipolar is because they are self-medicating with even narcotics and so on. And like that's really common in Hollywood, where that's how they end up discovering they're bipolar. So I'm curious for you, what is your thoughts about being medicated, medication, and why there's this stigma about it?
Well, first question is, how do I feel about it? So I've been happily medicated for the majority of my adult life. It helps me. And I don't think there's anything wrong if you talked earlier in the opening, right? When you have a heart attack, or like if you have heart disease, does anybody question whether you should take medication for your heart? Obviously, you'd still say you should exercise, you should eat better, you should do all those things. But that in and of itself isn't necessarily going to make a disease go away. You also need to supplement support with medication. And that's how I look at any sort of mental health issue, is that if there's something there that can help you, you should use it. So I'm a fan, but I also know that medication it's not easy finding the right one. And so I think people get very frustrated and give up, I think maybe too early in their journey to find the right medication. And I can say for the first number of years, I definitely did not find the right medication, but that was to me okay, I'm just going to have to keep going and keep trying, because I'm not willing to live with the feeling of, when you're poorly medicated, it's a terrible feeling. So I'm not willing to live like that, but I'm also not willing to live in that fear of at any moment, I could have another episode or be severely depressed, which is debilitating. So that's my perspective. I guess I'm also very lucky in that I have found medication that works for me.
It keeps you above water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And that when something might trigger you, I'm just from my own experience, like I used to, for example, get panic attacks going into elevators. And I remember years before that making fun of people who would, not making fun, but being like, why were you scared of going in an elevator? But then I would go in an elevator and be like, oh, I got to get out. But the medication helps me just stay above water. So I go in and I breathe and I'm like, oh, I'm not actually going to have a panic attack. So is that how it feels for you, in a sense?
Yeah. It keeps me stable. Mm-hmm. And that's the key is I don't want to be too high and I don't want to be too low.
Right.
I want to be stable. But I still want to have emotions, right? And that's the key. So, when the first medication I tried was lithium, and I had no emotions. And that was equally as terrifying as going too high or too low. To have zero emotions is a terrible place to be. So you want to find that place where you feel like, yes, I can be happy and I can be sad, and you should have those feelings, right? You shouldn't be just neutral all the time. So it's finding something that helps you find that balance.
Going back a little bit to Hollywood, I know there's a lot of different celebrities that have come out recently saying that they have bipolar. And it goes from all the spectrums, from Elon Musk to Kanye West, Demi Lovato, Frank Sinatra, a little bit of everybody. But a lot of times also in film, the way they depict people with having bipolar as well is, I think, adds to the stigma. So what are some of the thoughts you have as far as seeing how it's used in pop culture, music, movies, or even just maybe in conversation where people might be like, oh, have you taken your medicine today? Or, oh, are you being bipolar? Like, how does that affect you? And what would you like for Hollywood to know about people with mental illness and how they can kind of step in to make sure they're not continuing the stigma and making it where more people are scared to get help or admit that they do have bipolar for the fear of how that could backlash on them?
Well, I think your point that it reinforces this stigma, I think is really important. So, you know, I guess this idea of, you know, when people tweet, you know, I might be feeling a little bit bipolar today. Well, I don't think that's fair. It's an illness. And if you think you have an illness, then you should probably go and speak to a doctor and get help and get support. I'm not sure how tweeting it is something that is helping you or anybody else. And I think it's important that we remember that it is an illness and it is debilitating, and that to make light of it isn't fair to somebody who's really struggling with something, and that it does just create this, you know, in some ways it's glorifying something that really doesn't deserve to be glorified. And also, you know, again, just keep going back to somebody who's really struggling. That's not going to help them, and that's going to make them feel so much worse.
Follow up, how do you think Hollywood should, I guess, do a better job of representing people with bipolar, even being medicated with mental health in general?
You know, I've never thought that much about Hollywood, to be honest. I mean, I think that, like anything, you need to, when we think about how does Hollywood or any sort of community represent diversity, right? You need to show a variety of real life scenarios, right? And so when you paint anybody, doesn't matter whether we're talking about mental illness, a physical illness, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, whatever it may be, when you start to pigeonhole and paint this picture of any group as this one, you know, it's not right, it's not fair, and it doesn't help. And so why wouldn't we take the same level of effort in terms of promoting diversity when we talk about, you know, neurodiversity is equally as important. And so I think a more educated approach and something that's more realistic. It may not be as fun, I guess, for a movie or for, you know, but there's real people behind it. So I think education is really important.
And just to remind everyone listening, you are the first CEO in Canada, correct, to come out?
Yes. So it's one thing, actually, talk about Hollywood. I've been paying a lot of attention to the business community. The business community is even farther behind. Right. People in the business community do not talk about their own personal experiences, even in, you know, in general, you know, depression, anxiety disorder have become much more normalized, but you still would very rarely hear somebody who's a business leader speak about their own experiences, even with depression, anxiety, let alone something like bipolar disorder.
Right. I want to insert here, Camille, and then you'll ask your question after, but I wanted to ask you, usually bipolar, or not usually, but I've read that the onset can come on in your early 20s. And that's a time, what you mentioned earlier, you know, you're in university or you're just graduating or you're trying to find yourself. You know, the frontal lobe doesn't fully develop until you're 25. And then like if you're 20 and boom, you start experiencing manic symptoms or psychosis. And there's individuals that need to drop out of school to get help or need to put school on hold. You know, everything just kind of stops until you get the help that you need. So what advice would you give to someone who's going through that and they're thinking in their mind, I cannot tell a friend because they'll think I'm crazy. There's no way, like, it's not like you write it on your resume, you know, like when you're interviewing, you know that you have this and it may affect work, but of course you're not going to come out saying I have bipolar to someone who is interviewing you. But then if something happens in your job and you're feeling high or low, you know, what do you do? So it's a lot of questions thrown at you right now, but I guess the general theme is, what would you tell a 20-year-old who's experiencing this in their life right now?
One, I'd say be patient, and you get the help that you need, and things will get better. It doesn't have to control you. So that's one is there is light at the end of the tunnel. I think the most important thing, at least for me, was finding developing a really strong support network. And I'd say, my first year dealing with this, and again, being away from home, I found one, didn't have to be a lot, but I found one really, really, really close friend that I could be completely open with, completely honest, and he supported me in just the most incredible ways. He would come with me to doctor's appointments. He would, whatever I needed, he was there. But most important was that I could be honest with him. And having just that one person made a lot of difference. And I wouldn't go and tell lots of people. I wouldn't tell, somebody that if I was applying for a job. You don't need to, but you need to have your people. You need to have your people.
Because it's not like you would say, I have heart disease.
No.
You wouldn't say that, or I have cancer when you're applying for a job.
No.
But yet you'd have the support system behind you. And I think it's also just really empowering that you're sharing your story. I can't say it enough, because there are 20 somethings out there who are listening, hopefully, to this podcast, and they're understanding, look at you. Yes, you're married, you have kids. There are some people who might be thinking, I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to find someone who loves me for who I am. I'm never going to find a job. But you did. And the more people that come out to say their success stories, and that's the support that they had, and even by you saying all the positivity that you experienced, then the more people will feel safe doing it. I just wanted to read, there's an article written in Healthy Debate, and it's called Restoring Dignity, A Teenager's Insights into Inpatient Psychiatric Admission. And a 19-year-old who shares their story. And the editor's note is interesting. Healthy Debate has agreed not to publish the name of this author over concerns the diagnosis of bipolar disorder will affect future academic endeavors. I wanted just to know your comments on that. And then I want to read something from this individual's article.
I don't know what I think about that. I mean, I think in today's world, it's the right thing to do, is the reality. I'd also say you're young. And so when I was 19 and 20, I was not in a place where I could have handled that level of publicity. It's a very vulnerable place to be. And so I would say even for this young woman's own mental health, it's probably the right thing, so that she has, doesn't have to experience that, right? And she's a little bit protected. But the reality is, until we get farther along in terms of destigmatization.
Yeah. And perhaps, like we said, when you're older and you've been having all of that support like you did, then perhaps more people will come out. And maybe in time, 20-year-olds will be able to have, come out and say it with, pride, and just kind of with like, I'm okay. I'm not going to be, people aren't going to turn against me. Hopefully. But what I wanted to read in this article was she does talk about care and her experience in the ER. But this paragraph, now I have withdrawn from a semester of university, and what I lack in traditional education, I've gained in firsthand experience. I've learned about the gaps in acute psychiatric inpatient care, which I hope to somehow improve in the future. I'm learning how to take on a new lifelong illness in stride, knowing that the illness will present its challenges, but that I have the potential to live a fulfilling life. This I cannot undertake on my own. It will take a supportive team of nurses, psychiatrists, friends, and family to give me the tools to live with bipolar disorder. And she also goes on to talk about, like I mentioned, having to wait quite a long time in the emergency room. And this perhaps is the certain systems in Canada. In the United States, though, we may have some of the same issues. But what are your thoughts on this article? I know that you've read it, and I'd love to know your thoughts on this article.
So it's emotional.
I know.
I thought that this young woman was so brave, and like, I was so impressed, so articulate, writing about her experience, which I can only imagine was extremely traumatizing. So many things come to mind. Number one, the comments about the gaps in our system. And so again, I don't know what it's like in the US, but in Canada, getting support for mental health is really hard. We are so under, just the access is so limited. We just don't have enough support. And there's not enough education. Excuse me.
No, it's a very emotional article, and I really recommend people to read it. Just how brave this individual was. And actually, when I read this article, it led me then to find your article and then to interview you. So which is, I think, so that's such a great, what you did is exactly that. It's wonderful that she was able to, even though she didn't share her name, which it wasn't important, it was about sharing the story. And that by sharing the story, it's starting the conversation and led you down a path, and hopefully leads other people down a path. So I'm so amazed at this young woman for what she's done. But the story, it shouldn't happen. This is the year 2022. This should not Hopefully
happen.
Her article will help with the systems and other people who speak up about the systems, but just the whole idea of having that support system in place is key. You are working on so many great initiatives that Camille would like to ask you about.
Yes, please tell us about your new Henry's Foundation and the Uncaptured Moments campaign.
So the Henry's Foundation, it's actually run by my sister. We work closely together, though, so there's a important partnership between the foundation and between the business. And this was actually that same sort of day when we sat down after the funeral and said we need to do something about this, was also when we decided that we needed to focus our efforts around community giving, specifically around mental health, and sort of laid the foundation to eventually start the foundation. Using that word too much. So the foundation is in support of mental health, supporting Canadians across the country, and we're really focused on destigmatization, early prevention, which I think is a really important part of sort of our family story, is that the earlier you can get support, the better chances you have of managing and not relapsing and living a healthy life. And we want to also use the Henry's being photography and videography and content creation. That's what we focus on. Is there's a real tie between creativity and expression and mental health. So we also run programs ourselves to try and connect those two. And so this is where Uncaptured Moments comes in. So hashtag Uncaptured Moments is a social media campaign, and we're encouraging people from all over, all walks of life to post the real moments in your life. And one of the challenges with social media is, it's always these perfect moments, right? Mm-hmm. And you're looking your best and you're having the best time with your friends. Everything's perfect. Everything's curated, though. It's not real. And it makes it hard for, we know that social media can have some really negative impacts on your mental health, on young women, how they feel about themselves. There's lots of great things from social media, but we know that there's a lot of downsides. And so with this is we want people to share the real moments and how they're feeling, so that, you can, again, we all need to see what's real. So it's great. If you follow the hashtag, you'll be able to see, people posting and talking about their experiences. And it's very real. It's very raw. It's very vulnerable. And I think it's very beautiful.
I was going to say, it's not necessarily sad and depressing. It's beautiful, real life moments
Mm-hmm.
people need to share. Yeah. Unfiltered, right?
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Gillian, for joining us today. I really do feel like this episode is going to help so many people to reach out and get support. If you are suffering from any mental illness that you're maybe not sure, you're coming from a place of, questions, please reach out. I'll have many different sites that you can reach out to. Of course, the suicide prevention helpline is always available. And you can also contact me, Karen, at Grateful Goddesses, if you'd like some more resources. But Gillian, thank you so much for bringing this out, for coming out with this, with your story. And we are so grateful that you joined us on Grateful Goddesses. Thank you.
Thank you for helping me share my story.
Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
Welcome, everyone, to Favorite Things on Grateful Goddesses with our guest, Gillian Stein. Now, I did take a photography class, and I was the worst student because we would put our photos up. And, the homework would be use manual, like you have to take photos, blurry in the distance, all of these different projects. And we put them up and we go up and kind of rate each other's photos. And mine was always like, forget. But I realized, you know what, who cares? I'm still I like taking pictures. I like capturing moments. And these are the moments, we all have this many of us have these types of frames in our homes that have multiple photos that we captured. These are my kids when they were much, much younger. My son here is now 27 and he's engaged. This is my daughter making a snowman when she was, 5. There's my baby who's now 20, my husband. But these were fun times, capturing, their first day of school, a dance class, the first snowman, American Girl. Capturing these moments. And my aunt is a photographer. She used to capture us when we didn't know, like when we weren't looking. And this is me watching.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And these are the types of photos that she would do. This is me too, playing in a playground. I remember this. She's like, hey, look here. And I was like laughing. So I love those types of photos and how they capture those beautiful moments. Camille, what did you bring that makes you happy and you'd like to share?
I brought the whole kit and caboodle. I brought my camera bag for that same reason that you were mentioning about your aunt that would just capture moments and maybe people weren't looking. That's me to the T. Every family gathering or party or whatever, I bring this bag. It's got my trusty dusty Nikon in it. I actually have 2 cameras in it, one for my daughter, one for myself. So if she feels the need to want to capture as well, it's my first camera. So she goes around so I can get her perspective of things too. So it's fun for me to just go out in nature, take pictures or take family pictures. It started because when I had my daughter, I was just obsessed with her and would just constantly take pictures of her with my phone and then would post, of course. And one of my girlfriends who was like, you need a real professional camera. So she bought me one as a gift. And then I started taking classes and learned all the depth of field, like you mentioned earlier. And
yeah, see, I couldn't even remember what it was called. I was like blurry in the background. That's what a bad student I was.
Well, that's fine because I'm dyslexic, so all that f-stop stuff was a problem for me. And what's this? I would just I'm just going to turn it until it looks right, and that's what it's going to be, and then see how it comes out, and just hope it for the best. So to this day, Adobe is just way too hard for me. So I don't edit beyond cropping, speaking of unfiltered. But so this is my favorite thing, is my turquoise blue camera bag that I carry with me everywhere that I go, every vacation, everything. So.
Oh, you have no idea how happy you just made me. That's beautiful.
Well, did I make you unhappy? Because I gave
No, I love it. No, I love it. I actually feel so. I'm going to share my favorite thing, please. And it's not a camera, and it's not. I have a photo. It's not a camera. So my favorite thing, I wasn't able to cue this so I could actually get the live one. So I'm going to actually share my screen for a second. My favorite, or something that brings me happiness and joy, I guess so I love my children. I do deeply, but there is something about my dog. So this is my Luna. And she is just this, like, the most just bundle of happiness. And I'll stop sharing so that you can, or I'll give you a few more seconds with her because she's so damn cute.
How old is Luna?
Luna is almost 2. And what I love about her is that there's no judgment. And this is with any dog or any animal, right? There's no judgment. Mm-hmm. There's no, she doesn't ask me questions. She doesn't tell me about, what I did wrong during the day or that my makeup's not right. She's just there, and she can sense when you need a pick me up. She knows when you just want to snuggle. But the other thing that I love is that she gets me out. And so we go for, a number of walks a day. And the thing about her is she's just the friendliest dog ever. So she will go up to any stranger and just start to jump. And because she's little, it's fine. And she does this little dance and everybody gets so happy. And so I feel like when I go out with her, I'm just bringing joy everywhere I go because everybody gets so excited. And this feeling that it just changes the mood. And so no matter what's going on in my life, it's like I can spend some time with her and take her for a walk. And not only am I making myself happy, I'm making other people happy. So that's what I wanted to share.
Oh, Camille and I both have dogs. We're dog lovers. And also, with COVID, did you know that there were so many pets that were purchased, so many people got pets just to help them through. And it's interesting because, like you said, pets they don't judge, and they're very helpful to individuals that are feeling sad, and they pick up on those emotions, right? And they're able to, like, when I'm feeling sad, my dog will often come snuggle near me, and I'm like, oh, thank you. You understand. He just kind of gets it. We love our dog.
Very much so.
They bring so much joy. And like I said, they pick up on emotions, and they just help you to stay balanced and stay calm and get you going and get you outside. And so thank you so much for sharing Luna. Luna looks so cute. And thank you again for sharing your story on Grateful Goddesses. Enjoy your day. Thank you.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com, to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.